Leaders Angle event we run more or less every month to engage with particular hot topics in relating to business and management. And we bring together experts and also people from the wider public who want to talk and engage around particular subject. I invite you to engage with us during the conversation by asking questions online or asking questions in the room if you're here with us. I invite you to join us on social media using hashtag LeadersAngle or hashtag Responsible Leadership, and you can find us on all the major social media channels. But also, I invite you to come and join us physically in the room if you're not in the room with us, and because we look forward to seeing you in person at the business school. And I want to say the business school sees itself as a convening space for these types of activities for the Cape Town area, for the Western Cape, for South Africa, and even for Africa itself. So you are really welcome to come and join us. So thank you for that. So today we're here to talk about quiet quitting, and I'm very happy to have my two colleagues with me. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a second, and then what the format of the event will be that we will have a short intervention from each person. Then I have a couple of questions for them. Then I'm going to open up to our stakeholders and people in the room, but also to those who are joining us online. I hope we can have a stimulating debate about the topic. So, Natasha.
Thank you, Mark. So for those that don't know me, my name is Natasha Winkler-Titus. I lead the postgraduate diploma in leadership development, and I'm also the module head for organizational behavior, and that is because I'm by qualification an industrial psychologist or work psychologist. I've 27 years in practice doing these things and 2 years talking about these things. So this is a hot topic for me. I try to steer clear from it for a very long time because I think it is a minefield. I'll tell you why shortly. But there's just so much embedded in this topic. So as an organizational behavior specialist, this is my favorite thing to talk about. And I see a few people in the room that share that passion with me, so I'm sure we're going to have good input from the room as well.
Thank you. Nicky?
Thank you, Mark. Natasha. Yeah, so my name is Nicky Terblanche. I am currently the head of the Masters in Coaching program. I also am an executive coach practicing myself, so I have anecdotal and first-hand experience of this phenomenon, quiet quitting, and how people are reaching out for help. And then also I am very passionate about research. I'm also this year heading up the research module, and I'll also try and bring a research angle into our discussion today to see what science can maybe tell us about this. So very much looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. I should probably introduce myself. My name is Mark Smith. I'm the director of the Stellenbosch Business School, and I do research in the areas of human resource management and careers, and really happy to be here to launch the debate, but also to ask questions and to field your questions. So let's plow straight in. So first of all, let's think about, it's just a short intervention around what we understand as quiet quitting. And even, as Natasha said, there's a lot in there, and there's a lot in there because I would like to say that there's nothing new. It's something that's been around for a long time, that people have different levels of engagement in their jobs. There are different levels of engagement over time, different levels of engagement between different types of individuals, different personalities, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing because that leads to a diversity of experiences at work. That leads to a serendipity of us meeting other people who are not workaholics, or meeting workaholics and giving them a dose of reality and encouraging them to look outside the window every now and again. But there is still a problem there in the sense that if there are people who are not actually pulling their weight and not doing their work. So let's think about what quiet quitting is. When we talk about quiet quitting, we hear people talk about people who are just doing the bare minimum, people who are just doing just enough not to be fired. Okay? So that's the lazy worker in the corner who's really doesn't take on any extra tasks and works just even below the minimum, we might say, but just enough not to get into trouble, and perhaps not to be a team player. Now, we have evidence of this over time, that people work to rule. In fact, in many industrial disputes around the world, people might work to rule as a precursor for going on strike and actually stopping work totally. So just doing what's in my job description. And any of us, I'm sure, around in the room today and online, if we look at our job description, we only did what was in our job description that we signed 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago. We are still doing many more things in our job description. So the job description is always a problematic area, and it relies on us as to be flexible in relation to that. But also that's a beneficial, because who would want to be doing the same job they were doing 5, 10, 20 years ago, even 2 years ago? So in that sense, it's a perennial problem. This particular concern around quiet quitting has emerged from a single TikTok video, apparently, that mentioned this, and that kind of went viral, and then suddenly everybody's panicking about it. People from big consultancy companies like McKinsey are talking about it. People like Natasha, my colleague, are talking about it. Harvard Business Review is talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. Yet it's something that just sprung up from something on 2 kids on social media. But I think it's also come up because there's both a tendency to hang on to what's the latest trend that's emerging in work life, the trend that's emerging in the working environment, but also because there's something behind that. So firstly, our tendency to want to hang on to what's going on in the working environment. What preceded the quiet quitting? The Great Resignation. But when we look at the Great Resignation, actually, there weren't that many people actually just stopping work and going to the beach and not working anymore, because most of us have to still work and have a job. So there were a few people who did that and regretted it, but there were a few people who, most people talked about it quite a lot, and actually there was evidence of people doing it in certain sectors, and that's where often we see job shortages now in hospitality and service-type jobs, both because those jobs were actually very heavily impacted upon by the pandemic, because those jobs ceased to be very functional. People lost those jobs, may have retrained, realized they found another way of working. But also some people don't necessarily want to go back to those jobs because they're particularly exposed to risks that they may not be happy to engage with. Other people are desperate to get back and actually see real people. Others are quite comfortable to be in that space. But we also hook onto it, not just because as managers and McKinsey and Harvard Business Review are all happy to hook onto the latest trend, also because there's something there. And I think there's something that's there, is that the sort of the pandemic environment demonstrated to us that we need to relook at our work-life issues, or work-life balance, as we say, or some people say, but I tend to prefer work-life integration, because nobody has balance. To be honest, it's about integration and a constant battle between those two areas. But during the pandemic, at least when we weren't commuting and home more, people saw, there's my husband, there's my wife. Actually, I might spend more time with them, or my kids, or whatever it might be. So there was a sense of re-engaging with the life side of work life, and people wanted to say, okay, now we're looking at the post-pandemic period. We're saying, well, can I renegotiate that space? And employees are somehow might be demonstrating a certain amount of agency in that space. So those employees who are just doing their job and setting boundaries, they perhaps have nothing to worry about. Those people, if everybody just did their job, that'd be pretty cool. It's the people that are not doing their job, or doing somebody else's job, or not doing part of their job, that's part of the problem. And then the other part of the problem is perhaps people who do their job and somebody else's job and get burnt out and they're workaholics. But they don't see themselves doing that. So the real side of this, I would argue, is that there's a reflection on, okay, what does it mean to work? We're not slaves to our employers. We might be reflecting on how we might balance those different parts of our lives, and perhaps have different priorities. We experienced burnout during COVID, perhaps. We experienced particular pressures that we're not necessarily willing to face anymore. And those people that might be leading it might be those younger generations. So another thing that's not necessarily new is older generations go, oh, those young people, they don't work very hard, do they? So, and if you're as old as me, I was a Generation X person apparently, and we were called slackers by the baby boomers. Okay, so there's always this thing that we blame the next generation down, that they're not taking life seriously enough. Okay, but I think that we could also say that those Gen Z people are also holding up a mirror to life and saying there's more to life than just working till your level of burnout. So on the one hand, we have something that is perhaps quite superficial, TikTok, social media, latest trend. But on the other hand, we have a sort of existential type question that's about why we work, how much we should work, and how much time we should devote to other things in life that enrich our lives, that enrich our work lives perhaps, but also enrich the lives of those in our families and our households and among our friends. So after that opening spiel, I think that's a good link to Natasha, who's going to tell us the psychological side of things.
Am I? So we started this conversation before this event started. I've been talking about this just because I couldn't run away far enough. Janine found me. As work psychologists, we are really scientists. We're not really people. So I always tell my students I don't really like people, but I like watching them. So I don't like messiness. And when you throw something like quiet quitting at me, it's messy. It's just messy. So I steer clear. I'll ask you, what is the problem that you would like me to solve? Okay. So as we start speaking, if we look around, we're sitting with quiet quitting because quite a few people confirmed to be here tonight, hence the seats, and they didn't pitch up. And we started talking about what is happening since post-pandemic. They're accepting the invitation, but they're not showing up. It's that, I really want to go, but it's so comfortable to just log in. Just so much easier to just do it from home. And we're trying to figure out what is causing them. And Janine said somebody told her if she figures that out, then she can tackle world peace after that. Okay? Because human beings are complex things. Okay? But for my sins, I've decided this is my field, this is my life, and this is what I study, and this is what I do every day of my life. So since it became a trend, I figured out we can't steer clear from it, because at university we like things to be neat and tight and two constructs that we can study, not this messy thing. But the world out there is talking about it, and if we have business school for social impact and for responsible leadership, then we have to join the conversation. So the first thing I do is try and figure out what's going on. What conversation are we having? So as Mark said, this is a trend. We live in a world where social media is as accurate as the scientists. We couldn't see it better than during COVID. I mean, all of us were scientists and we were statisticians. We started questioning the numbers after night 2. That's the reality. People are information overloaded. So it's our job to filter the fake news or the nonsense out of the real stuff and then come up with solutions. So it's a trend we have to get in there. It's also a trend that's confusing. So when I started talking about this, I had to figure out what am I talking about. So I didn't go to Twitter, I just can't. And I didn't go to TikTok, I just can't. But I went to Facebook and LinkedIn and Google to see what this is. I didn't go to the academic books because I wanted to see what people are talking about. And the definition is problematic because the characteristics of what people are talking about could be performance issues. So I agree 100% with Mark. I think if everybody just did what was in their contract, we wouldn't have a problem. That's why you have a contract. And I always tell people, if you do your contract, don't expect a bonus or a promotion or anything, because it's not in your contract that you're going to get a bonus or promotion. That's the nice stuff. Okay? But if everybody did that, we wouldn't have a problem. Challenge is we don't. So some do less and some do more, and then we have this unhappiness and unfairness experience. So the way people are describing quiet quitting is anything from you missing meetings and deadlines, which to me sounds like you're not performing your job, so it's a performance issue. But then it also talks about you lack passion and you're not excited anymore and you don't socialize with your team. Now it sounds like you're disengaged. Okay, so it's engagement we're talking about, and both of those fields are really big out in the knowledge space. So the definition is problematic. Okay. But the reality is, and Gallup surveys that were done in this year found in the States that half of the workers in the States are saying they are quiet quitters. So that's problematic. Whether we can define it or not, it's a reality. People are not going, they're not giving more, they're not going above and beyond. They are not showing up. So it's not just work, because this is this is not a social function. So even though it's not in your contract, people used to love doing this because I want to network, I want to learn, it's extra. Why are we not doing that anymore? Why are we not showing up? Okay, so it's not just in slacking off in my work. And as I was talking on the radio the other day, somebody phoned in and said, she sees this in her house. She's got young kids in her house, young adults. And what she's seeing is they not just drawing the line, but it's almost like a silent protest against the establishment. And, are we going there now? Okay. But it's if you take work as a system, as the establishment, there's almost a go slow. It's like we're kicking back. So maybe it's not as quiet. Maybe we're actually trying to send a message here. Something in the system is not working. Okay. So these are all the things that's going in my mind. Now I'm trying to solve that. Okay. So how do you make sense of it? First of all, I start with how has things changed? Okay. So like Mark said, this is not new. It's always been there, but we definitely saw an increase post-pandemic and post-lockdown and post everybody kind of getting back to normal. So we've definitely seen a shift in how work is done, how we think about work, where do we work, all of those type of things. And we've been talking about it for decades, but we're living it now. Okay. We know with the remote work in South Africa alone, pre-pandemic, for those qualifying, less than 4% of people took this up. I was one of those remote. I'd used Zoom for the last 10 years. It wasn't new. But when the pandemic hit and we were locked in, we had no option. So those people that qualified in South Africa, the number was close to 40. We were around 38% at some point. Now that's a drastic change overnight. But also it wasn't an option, it wasn't a choice, it was forced. It was the only way to survive. That brought a lot of challenge. But it also brought a new awakening, an awakening of, hey, I can do my work in a different way. I can do my work in a different place. So suddenly this thing of autonomy started waking up inside of people. I can watch my kids play soccer while I sit on a Teams meeting, and I'm pretty good at both, And so it started opening up new ideas for people. What we've seen in the meantime in the marketplace, I remember some of the early days, Discovery was the first to say everybody back in the office, rule, and a lot of employees followed suit. It wasn't long and Discovery retracted. They said, wait, hang on, we'll renegotiate. So there's a little bit of limbo at the moment. We're not really sure hybrid, in-person, remote, what are we doing? What do people want? How do we work? We're in testing waters at the moment. So that's the one side of it. The other side of it is also this idea of meaningful work. We were all very busy during lockdown, because there was nothing else to do, and there was a lot of stress, and people were dying around us, and there was a lot of insecurity. So everybody grabbed onto whatever they could control, whatever made sense to them. And for a lot of us, work made sense. Okay? Work was the thing that grounded us. So we did work hard because that was all we could do. We could work on weekends because you couldn't go out. You couldn't do anything else. Okay? So I'm also wondering, are we not maybe just recalibrating? Is this really an issue, or aren't we just trying to figure out. So if my employee was working all kinds of hours and on weekends, I've kind of accepted that as the norm, as the standard. So now if I can't get hold of you on weekends, or you're not responding to me at 10 o'clock at night, am I calling it quiet quitting? Because I've become used to it. A mother that has autonomy says, hey, during the day I want to spend some quality time with my kids, because I'm actually very good at doing this admin and email stuff at 10 o'clock at night. So they choose to do that because they've got autonomy. But as the boss, did I start accepting that as the norm? And now if I can't get hold of them, I say, I have the impression they're quietly quitting. So could that be something going on here? I don't know. Okay. So the two things I pull out that make sense to me is employee engagement and the psychological contract. As Mark says, we all have an employment contract and you have to do your job. The challenge is that job is not always very clear. We have job descriptions. The job description tells you what you need to do. It doesn't tell you what the outputs are. So if it tells you what you need to do, it should tell you how you do it and where you do it and when you do it. But if it tells you what the outputs are, and you have control over how you do it and when you do it, you have more control, you have more autonomy. So the psychological contract is challenged at the moment. People are not feeling that they're getting what they need from a work point of view. And psychological contract, unfortunately, is messy because it's very personal. It's your expectations and your perceptions of things. And the only way to get to that is to have conversations with your leaders about expectations. Somebody shared the other day about employee relations. And when you start a new job, well, most of us, and you have reasonable control and you negotiate, okay? And you think, wow, that was an amazing offer. And you actually walk away quite chuffed with yourself. I've negotiated this good offer. And it takes you 2 months and you find out somebody else has got a better offer. They've got a different working arrangement, or they're being paid more. And then you feel your offer is unfair. When did it become unfair? Because for you it was fine until you started comparing. So that's the challenge with expectations, and it's perceived. The other challenge, or the big thing for me that all of this is going on, is employee engagement. Now, employee engagement is a complicated thing because there are different types of engagement. First of all, am I engaged to where I work, in my workplace? Okay? Do I actually like the people that I work with? Would I go above and beyond? Do I feel proud to be associated with the brand? But then I also need to be engaged to my job, the thing that I do. Okay? And that's where it becomes tricky because we're talking about this is not a new thing. So, Mark, you were talking about why people work. So, back in the 80s, already a quarter of employees, people that work, a quarter of workers spend more than 80% of their time working. We would call them workaholics. They didn't believe it. They felt they're living their dream. That was in the 80s. We did some research in South Africa very recently. And when we asked South Africans if you had the means to stop working, if you win the lotto, 75% said they will continue working. But they will choose what work they do. They will choose where they work. See the autonomy coming back in. And I am mindful of my time, so I'll wrap it up there. So first, a few things that I'll say. First of all, I think it's important there's a trend, but we first have to figure out what is this trend leading us to. I think it's just too big. And if you don't know what you're solving for, you'll be very busy with a lot of things and still have disengaged employees. I think we also just have to be mindful of our context. I think we are all coming out of this major pandemic that was very confusing and was very hurtful, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe we're just recalibrating. just before the pandemic, there was a lot of focus on performance management. There was actually a seminal paper around what's wrong with performance management systems. And that kind of got stopped in its tracks because during COVID, the focus was employee well-being and remote work. I think we need to go back there because I think performance management is very problematic in how we do things. And I think I'll end off there. We can take questions.
That's actually a nice link, because that notion around performance management and engagement, and whether it's an issue of management or an issue for the employee themselves, seems to be a particular sort of a nice sort of segue to thinking about the coaching angle. Is this an issue that needs to be addressed at the level of the individual or the level of the leader and the manager? I think Nicky's got maybe not necessarily all the answers, but some of the answers.
Yeah, so I'm going to be that person today with a hammer, and everything looks like a nail, right? That's one way of solving the problem. So lots of very good questions and discussions. Just before I go into coaching, just anecdotally, I know someone who lives in the same town as me, a very dedicated person, hardworking. You can't get a more loyal person than this guy, right? And during the pandemic, he was able to work from home. And now the company's changing the policy. He's got to go back 3 days a week. And he actually used the words, this is not a few days ago, I'm quietly quitting. Thank you very much, because they didn't see all the extra effort I put in. So just an anecdotal of what Natasha and Marcus has been saying. It's complex, and definitely we shouldn't try and oversimplify it and come up with one-line solutions. But coaching is a potential solution for this problem. Of course, I'm biased. I want to, first of all, just position coaching. Not everyone knows what coaching is. People confuse coaching with mentoring, for example. And I think of managers and their management style when I talk about this, right? Typically, a manager is someone who's more experienced. They know how a job should be done. And if you get stuck, they will tell you how to do the job, right? Try this, do that, do that. That's management or mentoring. A coach is someone who actually does not provide the answers. A coach is a one-on-one engagement with an individual or a group of people who uses listening, a few key skills: listening, questioning, feedback, and some framework or model to help people come up with their own answers, own solutions. And we use principles of psychology in that. So I'm telling you what coaching is because I think what is missing often in the workplace is this kind of engagement where the manager takes on a more non-directive and coaching approach versus a telling and directive approach. Coaching has, and I'll come back to that later, how we can practically do that. Coaching has grown phenomenally around the world. Literally, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Every time I write a new paper, I try and give a bit of background of coaching. I read up the latest stats, and it's exploded. There are now coaching platform companies, companies like BetterUp and Coach Hub, that employ thousands of coaches, and they are contracted to companies. And someone in a company wants a coach, they go to the platform and they get matched automatically. So coaching is growing because we now have scientific proof that coaching helps, it works. With what? With, among other things, engagement. So it's a very powerful, provenly scientific to help people with engagement, to help people feel appreciated and acknowledged. That is why my position here is that I think I do have a very powerful hammer to help nail this. Not all the answers, but I think coaching can give us some indication of how we can address it.
Okay, thanks. Short and sweet. Well, maybe I'll come back with a question just to sort of develop that point a bit further. So, is that a question of, for you, are we talking about coaching of the individual, or are we talking about who is quietly quitting, as Natasha would say, or are we talking about coaching of managers and leaders to help those individuals come back from quietly quitting?
Yes, so coaching, thanks for the question, Mark. So coaching happens on different levels in the organization. Classically, it's executive coaching right at the top, right? So these are experienced coaches who work with senior leaders. And they try and help them to understand behavioral change and how they can be more effective in the organization. And then it filters down. So if an organization can afford it, because coaching is quite expensive, they could coach the middle managers and senior managers. But you can't coach everyone in the organization. It's just not practically possible. So there's a new trend that we're seeing where leaders and managers are being asked to use coaching skills in their engagement, as I just mentioned, right? So there's this trend of managers being sent to training programs where they get basic background in coaching, and we do this on the MBA, the MPhil coaching, the PGDIP. We have basic module on how to become a leader as coach. And what the research shows is that if you engage with your employees in a manner where you are consultative, you are asking questions and listening, and I just want to go back to that. It's not easy to listen. We are very bad at listening. I do this exercise with a class where I ask them to pair up, and then each person has 5 minutes to speak on a certain topic or a question, and the other person is not allowed to interrupt. Many battle with it, because we want to put our point across. So to become a manager or leader as coach is you are using those coaching skills. And what happens then? When a quiet quitter, and I'm hypothesizing because I don't have stats for this, but if a person is disengaged from work and the manager approaches the person and says, why aren't you doing that, or what's happening, versus creating a space, a safe, psychologically safe space to ask the person, what is happening for you? What do you need? Listening not only with what the person says, but what's not being said, and showing that empathy. I think that kind of leadership behavior could help us to re-engage employees. And research has shown in top HR journals that managers who apply a coaching type approach have more engaged employees, and employees feel valued by the organization if they know that there is money being invested in training managers and leaders as coaches.
Thank you.
Can I say something on that? Since we're on the hammers, I want to that resonates with me because, what I struggle with the quiet quitting is it an individual phenomena or system phenomena? Because what are we fixing here? Because quiet quitting it's what you do. It's agency. You do something, even though it's nothing. So it's an individual thing. So let's work with individuals. But it's brought on because of systems that are broken. So what are we going to fix first? So I just want to tag on that because that's also where I go. It's like, how are you taking ownership of yourself and your own life and your own mastery? And two of my coaching students last year did research on that because we have a lot of research and coaching from the coach's perspective or from the business perspective. And we spoke to the coachee themselves and asked, how did you benefit out of this? And the one relationship that we found was because coaching is focused on self-mastery, the self-mastery then had positive benefits because I know myself more. And we tested the relationship with work-life balance, even though I don't like work-life, but it's a thing, so we could test it. And we found that people had more autonomy and almost control over their work-life balance and the choices that they make. That's also a benefit of coaching at the individual level. And for me, that's where the development needs to go. And that is why in our PGDIP in leadership, it is all about personal development of leadership in the system and in the context, but it's about that personal mastery.
Can I just hook on that this idea of leaders and managers and the previous points that Natasha was making about the pandemic and how that shifted things. Do you think that the pandemic has created an even greater need for coaches or leaders or managers as coaches to address this issue of engagement?
Absolutely. So I can answer that again, starting anecdotally. So I have been coaching since 2008, and normally my coaching clients come from corporates, and the corporate pays me as coach and I coach. So it's a three-way contract. I was really surprised, probably shouldn't in retrospect, to see how many of my old coaching clients that I coached many years ago came to me privately during the pandemic and said, please, can you help me? I know this stuff works because I've done it before. Can you help me? So I took on private clients, and my first question to them was, why does your organization not pay for this? And not to blame anyone, it was chaos at the time, but there wasn't the resources to do that. So they really came looking for help. And so you go through a coaching process, and often towards the end I would say, so, how has this been beneficial? And often it is what they see in the coaching process of how they are being coached is what they apply back in the workplace. And the leaders who demonstrated empathy and understanding while keeping a steady hand on this ship that was all over the place. I think those were the ones that had success, and for sure coaching can help with that.
Okay. But that's interesting. You raise the concepts of empathy and understanding, because there's the Harvard Business Review article I mentioned earlier about how everybody's picking up on this quiet quitting actually points out questions whether there's quiet quitting going on, and it's actually questions of problematic managers. And when they did this survey, they said actually quiet quitting is not an issue where you have empathetic and good managers and leaders. The quiet quitting is a problem where you don't have those managers, because those managers are not empathetic. They're not taking an interest in individuals' changing life circumstances that Natasha mentioned, and they're not taking an interest in in how individuals might have reprioritized or seeking to rebalance or recalibrate, as you said yourself. Can I just ask you one difficult question? You can decline if you want. Are we proposing to coach leaders, or are we proposing to coach managers?
So there's the semantics, right?
Yeah, well, there's semantics, and there's
yes.
also, but because I think that empathetic thing comes from people who really engage themselves with the people they work with.
I would say both. I just want to distinguish between the two. So there's the different levels of coaching. At the lower level, I say, is performance coaching, where someone needs to be coached to a level to up their performance. But for the rest of it, it's about what we call developmental coaching, which is, as Natasha said, it's about understanding yourself, self-awareness, know thyself, Oracle, that Dolphin, I think, said that, or was written. So whether you're a manager and more transactional and functional, or whether you're a leader that has to inspire and create a vision, you can do that authentically if you know yourself. And I think if you go through a coaching process, that's a crucial part to understand who you are, so that you then come across as being more empathetic. So both.
Okay, it's a good answer to a different question, which is not a very fair question to a colleague, I have to say. But that idea about knowing yourself, and I was just going to ask Natasha about a question about how we get that understanding ourselves of the type of integration or balance we might seek ourselves. But before I do, just to give everybody a heads up online and in the room, that after that we'll come to questions from everybody else, see what everybody else has to say. So Natasha, so thinking about this idea of knowing yourself, and again this recalibration, the word that you use, how do individuals get that balance right, or that integration right, or can they?
I saw one of my students that did the change management with me last week, and when I started the session, I told them, I'm going to teach you a change management model, and I'm not teaching you a change management process. I'm going to start teaching you to think about what is change and how you do it. And you need to understand the principles to come up with your own theory. We don't teach philosophy enough in life. People are not thinking about thinking anymore. We are not asking questions. We are not being mindful. The world is happening to us. We are not happening to the world. There's a few people in control of the world, and all of us just follow the system. Okay? And I think we need to break that cycle. I spent a good portion of my first part of my life fighting the system. I call myself a provocateur. I fought the system. I still fight the system sometimes, but I'm heading to my 50s and I'm changing course. I'm changing the system from within. It's my belief that if we empower people to take control of their own lives, they can fight the system from within, and they can create a better system for themselves. So this thing about personal mastery, which also links to emotional intelligence, which then feeds into whether somebody's a good leader or just a manager, which feeds all of what we're talking about, for me is what's lacking. And I think we need to go back to that first. So McGregor spoke about, we all know about theory X and theory Y. Okay, so if your principle, your deep down belief is that people are just lazy and I need to sort them out, you are going to manage them in that way. If your deep belief is that people are inherently good and they know what they need to do, I just need to create a context for them, that's how you're going to lead. It starts with how you think first, and that's the starting point of your personal mastery. The challenge is neither of those things are absolutely right or absolutely wrong. On the one side, we can't just give people a context and say, get on with it. We need to give them clarity. Okay? And leaders don't know, back to the performance management conversation, they don't know how to give people clarity. Just as early as, we're still on Tuesday, so it was this week, yesterday, I looked at a job description and I spoke with somebody that's extremely senior. We're talking here about junior people that have no control. This is a very professional role. And I think 3 times I asked the person, what is it that this role do? And spend a lot of time telling me what they do. Looked at the job description told me what they do. And at no point do I have a sense, so what? If this job is not here, what's going to be different in this context? And it was scary for me because this is a very senior professional role. How much more further down? So we're not giving people clarity as leaders on what they need to do. What does it look like? Because if you have clarity, then you have purpose. And that's linked to who you are and what you want to do in life and what makes you come alive. I see a lot of people around me, my own assistant when she worked, very disengaged. Oh, this is boring. Oh, I don't like. And then the meeting goes somewhere and I drop something and I see her eyes lit up because that's her thing. It energizes. She comes alive when she talks about that topic. So she's not quite quitting everything. She's quite quitting the nonsense that she thinks she shouldn't be doing. So that clarity. On the other side of leadership needs relationship, which is what so in the beginning I said the problem here is this psychological contract because nobody defines it, nobody spells it out, it's an expectation. Now if you're a strong leader with strong emotional intelligence and you're attuned with your people, you will manage that psychological contract because you will understand what everyone needs and how to get the best out of people, whether they work remotely or in office, then it doesn't become an issue. But that's the challenge we have, and it's both of those things need to be addressed. I love coaching. I'm all for coaching. I'm not sure it's the silver bullet just yet because I think it is not accessible. It is a marginalized thing, the way it's being put out and packaged. So what we're trying to do is bring it into leadership development, to give them the skills. And so it's not just that exclusive coaching contract that you have that really belongs to the organization. So how much is the person invested? Because, he's being paid to do that, etc., etc. But it's definitely a step to get us there. But we need different channels. And now I'm going to be sneaky and bring in the responsible leadership angle because at our business school, we don't believe in teaching and giving out certificates. We believe in growing responsible leadership. So in any program that you do, in the leadership component, those are the skills we're going to start nurturing in you to become a coach type of leader. I'll stop there.
I kept writing things down and Natasha's saying them already. So, but I think that's a nice segue. Firstly, to remind you to engage with us online or in the room with hashtag responsible leadership or hashtag leaders angle or even hashtag quiet quitting. But don't quit us, please. And maybe it's time to open up to questions in the room and questions online. We've heard about whether quiet quitting is both an old or a new phenomenon, an old and a new phenomenon. Perhaps we should say that. We've heard about how workers and employees are increasingly using their own agency and they're recalibrating themselves and perhaps looking for new meaning in their lives in relation to the trauma and the experiences they had during the pandemic. But actually, maybe that's just an acceleration of things that were happening anyway in terms of the long hours that we were working and our long commitment to work. But we've also thirdly heard about how it's a question of leaders and managers, leaders or managers, you can choose, but also whether they have the right competencies and the right skills to bring their employees along with them and to demonstrate empathy and understanding for particular experiences they've gone through and particular experiences they're going through right now. So, any questions? Chantel?
So you say that people are opening up getting to marketing on social media. I mean, that seems like risk averse if you're skipping out on meetings and you're not performing. Let's say even if you're just not performing on a bare basis that your contract states. Which leads me to the next question. On top of that, I mean, if it's trending on social media, and I mean it's starting to trend in real life, is there something that's prominent in younger generations at the moment? And is it increasing with new working generations? I want to put in brackets entitlement. And would you say that teaching accountability and perhaps incentivizing the way you raise your children and perhaps incorporating foresight with the youth to perhaps prevent a phenomenon or a pandemic of quiet quitting in the future younger generation, working generations?
Thank you. Maybe I can just collect if there's any other questions in the room. We'll start with that one. Yes. Sorry, I don't know.
A question/comment.
Okay.
Everyone that is in the back, great discussion. So really happy to be here. Just around quiet quitting, and I think it's I think learning is necessarily one definition, and perhaps the context in South Africa is different to the context of the world. But perhaps just coming out of COVID from the employee perspective, and maybe just going into my perspective as well, is that it can also be a way of employees kind of putting new boundaries in place and just reinforcing those boundaries. So depending where you are in an organization, sometimes it's easier to have that kind of conversation of setting expectations, and sometimes it's not. And given the context of South Africa, employment, etc., people might just feel about why I've got doing what I need to do, really basics. But that's especially the
Great question. And there was one more question. There's two, in fact. One and two. Please.
So I just wanted to check and ask a couple of things that resonated with me. You know, we've come through the pandemic where we've had to pivot off the pandemic to, for example, in my space, digitalize everything. So I've had to digitalize onboarding, leadership development, everything, you know, and it's taken working Sundays and Saturdays to get the organization to reset, but we didn't have time. So really I come from a very innovative organization. COVID has, you know, 10x innovation, and so after 3 years of 10x innovation, I'm exhausted. And now I need to, you know, it's hybrid, it's back. It's almost as if the organization is perhaps aware, but almost ignorant to, you know, the reality of where we've come from to what the reality is right now. You know, so it's hybrid is back. We want you in the office. You know, you've got to get your teams going. You still have to perform at the level at which you perform after you've pivoted. So you're performing at 10x. You're not going back to 5x each. So at the end of the day, you know, organizations are not hearing that people are exhausted. They are burnt out. You know, they are looking for some form of, you know, release to just stop this rat race, stop this treadmill. We've done our best for you. We've helped you to sustain your profits, sustain your performance through COVID in the last 2 years, and now just give us all a break. You know, can we not just shut business for 2 months and do this and then come back? And I think I personally think I've recently resigned because I chose to resign to reset. If I didn't, I would be constantly not having time to reflect and think and plan, you know, and be the person who I am and to be who they want me to be. So what my question is it not that the culture of the organization from where we started at this innovative pace. And when we're going to pivot to tenets on innovation, that we know in training and innovation, people are lagging behind because people need different, mechanisms or interventions to help them along. So isn't it something to do with the culture of the organization? And is culture not the perceived culture of the organization, the things they have, is actually far afield from before COVID?
Good question. Minty, I'm going to come to you, then I'm coming to my panel. So.
Thank you very much. It looks like when you define quite quickly, it's like a kind of negative concept here. But I've seen some literature in the social areas which are having a critical philosophy. In those areas, I have seen some literatures which define, according to their words, romanticizing resistance. I think sometimes a kind of reflection of resistance to structural and systemic oppressions that, or hegemony that in place with fear in their organizational environment or with certain market environment. So we necessarily see quite quickly as a negative negative practice. Sometimes it is
Excellent. Great questions. So I'm going to start with Natasha thinking about this idea of people actually admitting to quite quickly publicly, and if it's a generational dimension. Then I'm going to come to Nicky more about the organisational side and the extent to which organisations are deaf.
I'm more going to have reflections. I'm not sure I'm going to exactly answer each question. I'm just thinking, as you were talking, I made some notes. So I actually want to start with you and then linking it to what you were saying. So I also read, in fact, I was reading the latest Financial Mail when I flew in this morning, and Prof. Tuli Madansela wrote something in there, and one of the things she was talking about is the reality that we're living in, the fact that 1 in 3 people is unemployed, 1 in 2 people live in a poverty line. Then, in another, somewhere I picked up recently, a wellness barometer survey that said more than 75% of people are saying they feel emotionally stressed at the moment. PwC found that anxiety was actually, a lot of it was linked to financial stress. And remember, we survived. We got through this, but now we're potentially going into our next financial depression. So that's top of mind. So not everybody can actually physically quit and take their hiatus. I keep asking my husband, sure, I wish COVID could come back just a month or so. I miss that quiet. I miss that peace. Okay? So we all kind of want just a reset, but we can't afford it. We just have to go on, including our managers that we're so complaining about. And as I was thinking about this, and that's why I'm smiling as you were saying, and you also went there, I read another piece, something earlier this week about how you get this almost a quiet revolt just before the storm hit, before the world wars. There were these little revolutions that broke out. Now, South Africa, come on, we had 3 years of, first it was COVID, then looting in South Africa. If looting didn't shout at us a strong message that something's wrong, we're not getting it, and now we're faffing with quiet quitting. But I kind of go with that. That's why I said when that person on the radio went there, I think that's what I'm saying. We can't define it. It's messy, but there's a voice that's trying to come out. And we're linking this voice to the system called organization, but it might be bigger. So I agree with you. I think there's something deeper, and we need to figure out what are we solving for. Yeah. And we need to do it quickly. Then I also want to link back to what Shalene has said, and we know neuroscience have taught us a lot about change, okay? And as human beings, it's a difficult balance to strike, because we want to be stimulated. We know that the brain is a muscle. So there's this thing called brain plasticity. So you like change, you like to be stimulated, you like to grow. But if it gets too much change, then we also have prefrontal cortex suppression. So the neurons explode and then we get anxious. So COVID was a lot, but we haven't really gotten back to just reset the system again. We just carry on and carry on. So we need to keep that in mind as well. And then Chantal said something that I wanted to respond on, but I'm going to
social media and admitting.
So you were going on. So yes, the fact that it's there, that's what I'm saying. It's a loud voice that's trying to come out. What I like about it is we give it the thing called quiet quitting, but there's a lot going. We need to figure out what is this voice that's trying to come out. And it's usually in the masses when there's no formal way to get it out. It comes through this way. I'm not sure, Chantal, around the generations. Remember, it's also the first time that we have 4 generations in the workforce. Okay? So I think the younger generation are a little bit more open, putting themselves out there. They definitely use technology more. But I'm not convinced it's only the younger generation. I mean, if you just look around, and it's these type of people, professional people that had to keep the ship going during COVID, that is just saying enough. The only difference is we have different means of showing it. A person that is a young professional might have small working children. You can't just back off. You have to play the game. You have to put up the front. So you've got a lot more at stake. A younger person might not have much to lose, so they can shout out, but they have no structure, they have no foundation, so they're a bit lost. So I think the generational thing is also complex.
Thank you. So Nicky, you gave us that great piece of wisdom about us listening more than speaking. And so somebody told me once we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. But it seems that your question was about organizations that are deaf or ignorant. So
yes, I loved your question, and I can relate to it so much. At the beginning of the pandemic in April 2020, we were stuck at home. My wife's an artist, so she makes stuff from home. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to do my job." She says, "But can't you make something out of this opportunity?" So I interviewed 26 coaches around the world at the start of the pandemic to gather data, to do research on how organizations responded to the pandemic. And it gets to the point of how organizations listen. I also, during that time, coached a few people who were desperate for help. And I was actually, to be honest, I was shocked at, in some cases, I don't have stats on it, but how some organizations just did not support the people. One of my clients told me the story where the HR department was the first to leave the building and work from home, and God led him to sort out the rest of it. It's anecdotal, so I'm not generalizing. But and in New York specifically, the one coach I interviewed in the health, you remember the health care industry, there was in total chaos. No one was managing it, and the wrong messages were coming from the top as well, and how coaches had to step in. So I think, and then another thing, I would coach my clients, and they would be under severe stress trying to manage what's happening. And I said, but surely the organization has reduced your targets, right? Your KPIs, what you have to hit. No, it stayed the same. In fact, it went up. So you must understand that when I coach clients, obviously the organization is paying, so they are my client, but I'm working with the individual. Often I have to help the individual to cope in these situations. And it was really, generally, I think from what I saw, was disappointed in the lack of understanding that organizations from the top had in people's situation. Again, I'm generalizing. So I can completely understand your point, where people went above and beyond, and organizations simply not acknowledging it in all situations. So again, this is where coaching can help people, but are we really so set on making money above everything? I still need to see, this is not the real coaching coming on, the triple bottom line, the people, planet, profit. I see profit. That's what I see when I coach my clients. I see very little of the rest. And I think the pandemic, what was Warren Buffett who said with investment, when the tide goes out, you can see it's been swimming naked, right? Because everyone if it's a bull market, then it's easy to make money. I see this is what happened with the pandemic, where true leadership were being exposed for not being supportive. And I can understand that people are I used a rude Afrikaans word now, but people are tired, and maybe this is one of the reasons. So I completely understand your point. Organizations and leaders should do more to show compassion and to show the people side of it. I think that's one of the reasons we seek one.
Thanks. Sorry, because we're equally not deaf to our stakeholders who have joined us online. So I'm going to just pass over to Janine, who's going to just maybe select a couple of comments or questions, and then because I'm conscious of the time. So yeah.
Natasha's already touched on the fact that there doesn't seem to be a generational link, but there does seem to be across generations. There's comments made about can it be seen as almost like a precursor to resigning. Strangely enough, two people in this room I know have quit, and think of myself I've heard now, because they've had enough and they wanted to refocus. Okay? So it's almost as if the pandemic made us question our life and our values, and all of a sudden we realized and saw those naked people were swimming naked and they weren't matching our values. So there's another very interesting comment here about organizations that perhaps not realizing the extreme changes that employees had to go through over the last 20 years, fast-tracking new skills, innovation to improve their delivery, and that they're expecting the old employee to return, but now they've got all these new skills and abilities, so they're actually almost to a certain sense underemployed now, and the opportunity for the organization has gone lost, because they can actually deliver bigger, better, not necessarily more, but the skills could be. And then Bronwyn mentions synthesis between Ritzner, the hygiene factors, possible organizations still catching up with what it means today, like the back to burnout, defined as chronic stress. So it's almost being put back onto the employees like it's a stress syndrome, and people not speaking up. But these are realities: mental exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, and then of course it leads to professional effectiveness. And then someone else mentions that disengagement comes from working in roles that go against our natural wiring. And I would actually, even from a personal level, say it's a values disconnect and the values mismatch. And sometimes we see the nakedness only when the time is up. So
Thank you, Jenny. So I was going to give each of the. I'm very conscious of the time, and we've clearly had a lot to say, and there's a lot here. So we'll be back for sure. But I'm going to give each panelist a minute just to wrap up in relation to that. So, Nicky, do you want to start?
This is overall wrap up.
Yes.
Okay. So I really think we must focus on the humanity, on the human in the organization. This has been said so many times, but if COVID taught us anything, is how vulnerable we are as humans, but also how strong we are when we work together. So why can't we bring that back more into the organization and support people through initiatives like coaching, teaching people the skills of how to listen and how to ask questions. It's more difficult than you think. People need to be taught those skills. And I believe if we do those things properly and we see each other as humans and we make organizations a place of humanity, not just of profit, I think by also acknowledging people, not paying them more money, but acknowledging who they are, giving them feedback and recognition for what they do. That's what we want. When I worked in the corporate, I remember I also quit a few times, actually quit. And it was, as the saying goes, you quit your manager, right? It was when I was not heard or acknowledged, or I really worked for someone who was not a very nice person. And I think those things are fixable. So it's good that we have this quiet quitting as something to make us aware of all these old things that have been around forever that we can now finally hopefully address.
Thanks, Nicky. Natasha.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with know what you're solving for. We really have to become more mindful as leaders, as business, to know what is the problem we're trying to fix. I think it's a system. I think the system is shouting at all of us. But I go to what Nicky said earlier about, we speak responsible leadership, and most companies have people, profit, planet, triple bottom line. We all have values, but how much of that are we actually living? And I think there's been so many books in the last, we even had a conference about bringing humanity back in the workplace, rehumanizing work, humanocracy. So again, it's tick boxes, we do the right thing. I don't think it's the system, I think it's the people. So as individuals, we need to step up, take agency, grow into ourselves, and grow on that personal mastery and figure yourself out. And then as leaders, we need to develop leadership skills, because it's the leaders that create these systems. So those are the two things that stand out for me. But it's definitely, there's noise in the system and there's an explosion coming. I don't know what that explosion is going to look like. But I hope maybe another COVID so we can just chill.
I was hoping for something slightly more optimistic, but thanks, Natasha. So don't panic just yet is number one thing I wanted to say then. I wasn't planning to say don't panic, but don't panic. So I think we've seen, I would say tonight, how quiet quitting, whether it's an old phenomena or a new phenomenon, that sheds light on something bigger. There's something underneath there, whether it's that sort of superficial notion of what's happening on TikTok is actually a little window on something much bigger. Something much bigger in the sense of organizations in a certain amount of stress or tension or crisis, because individuals are resigning, because cultures don't match with the espoused cultures are not matching with the lived experience of individual workers, and that's leading to tensions, to burnout, and to people either dialing back or perhaps leaving completely. But then at the individual level, COVID is in the pandemic and the experience we find ourselves in now has accelerated the stresses we have as individuals in terms of burnout, in terms of well-being, but also perhaps just in terms of reflecting who we are and what we want to be. So the last thing I want to say is, this is just the start. I'm sure we're going to come back to this topic and many other topics. I like this idea of we're exposing the naked people who are swimming under the water, but we're not naked. But we will continue to challenge and expose those particular ideas and trends that are apparent and perhaps have a deeper roots in our past and in bigger trends in society. So come join us again, either online, and you're very welcome to join us here in the school. Engage with us on social media. And we look forward to seeing you again at Stellenbosch Business School. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to my panelists, Natasha and Nicky, and to everybody behind the scenes that made this work, but mostly to you for joining us. Thanks so much.